Welcome, everyone. This is a webinar, so everybody should be muted. If you want to ask questions of the panelists, please type them in the chat. My name is Leslie Orloff. I direct the National Immigrant Women's Advocacy Project at American University, Washington College of Law. And today we're here for a webinar on overcoming language barriers in policing, grants and resources that support language access programs in law enforcement agencies. And this is for law enforcement agencies and prosecution agencies and their staff. We want to thank the Office on Violence Against Women for supporting this event. The opinions, findings, and conclusions, recommendations that you'll hear today are expressed by the panelists and don't necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Justice or the Office on Violence Against Women. We have a great number of speakers today. Each of them will introduce themselves as they begin their part of the presentation. We're doing this structured so that you'll hear some presentations and then please put your questions in the chat and we will have a section for questions and answers at the end. By the end of this webinar, participants will be better able to know how access to technical assistance and trainings improve your agency's work with limited English proficient and immigrant victims, to employ best practices and innovative compliance strategies that improve language access to your agency's services, seek funding and resources that resources that support improvements in language access in your agency, and use resources developed by national technical assistance providers and federal government agencies to help your agencies better serve LEP and immigrant crime victims. So we're going to start with a brief explanation of the technical assistance that NIWAP provides here at American University. We provide training and technical assistance for state and local and federal law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, judges, and system-based victim advocate staff that serve a range of immigrant crime victims: domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, human trafficking, child and elder abuse, to name a few. We can bring free trainings to your jurisdiction with a team of peer-to-peer trainers, law enforcement and prosecutors, that focus on how to improve language access and how to best practices for working with crime victims, particularly using the T and U visas as crime fighting tools. We provide also peer-to-peer technical assistance. I'll explain that on the next slide. And you can call us for TA and we can match you up with another one of our national faculty who's a law enforcement officer or prosecutor or another national expert to get you what you need in your work to support your work with immigrant survivors. And we also can answer any questions you have regarding your work with LEP and immigrant survivors. We have a roundtable that is law enforcement and prosecutor led for law enforcement and prosecution agency staff, officers, DAs, and victim witness staff that work for law enforcement and prosecution agencies. This meets every other month. We also have a library of training materials that includes lots of government publications that are publications that impact your work with immigrant and LEP victims. We have a UN visa certification toolkit. We have a language access training tools and a webpage that will provide you for this training that helps you link to all of the resources of all of the presenters you'll hear from today. We also have multilingual Know Your Rights brochures that you can use when you're working with immigrant survivors. Lastly, we have a podcast series that we're happy to announce is newly been approved with a whole new group of podcasts designed for law enforcement and prosecution agencies working with immigrant and LEP survivors. And we'll be sharing that with all of you in the months to come. So I'm going to turn this over now to Hildy, who will talk about the TA available to you from the Asian Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence. Hildy?
Thank you so much, Leslie. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Hildegard Koenig, and I work for the Asian Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence. I am the Language Access VOCA and Courts Program Manager. I've been in my position for the past 6 months, but I've been in the field for over 20 years in very different capacities. So the Asian Pacific Institute on Gender-Based Violence is a national resource center on domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking, and other forms of gender-based violence, that we provide resources in regards to we provide TA, the trainings, education, as far as, we do cover in regards to abusive international marriages, domestic violence, elder abuse, engaging men, transforming gender roles, and sexual violence, human trafficking. We provide translated materials. We have a language hub, which is very, it has a lot of information. There has some tip sheets and information that way. But we do the Interpretation Technical Assistance Resource Center, which is part of the API GVV, which is part of the team that I'm with, ITARC, which is the next slide. It shows in there the different forms of trainings that we provide in regards to language access, because we know that limited language access affects the individuals you're working with, but it affects everyone, right? And it is just be able to provide that voice for those individuals that may be spoken voice or ESL for those that may be having a hard time, or victims that you may be working with. And so some of the trainings that we provide in regards to language access is civil rights compliance, have language access planning, policies, which is very important to have, so we don't react, but we have something in plan at the moment. And then building capacity to serve communities with limited English proficiency and accessibility. We also provide interpreting best tips in regards to working with individual interpreters, translators, and then and just also building a pool, but also a listing of individuals that are qualified interpreters that can serve you as you're working with those individuals, because you don't pick the victims you work with. So it's good to have those resources and those plans already in place. We also, we do have other tailored trainings that we provide in regards to that. So thank you so much. Let's see.
Laureen?
Great. My name is Laureen Lecklegaran. I'm an attorney with the Federal Coordination and Compliance section of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice. I always like to start these presentations with a little history. A little over 61 years ago, this picture was taken at the March on Washington in August 1963. As you'll see on the screen, there's one placard in particular that really is the essence of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. No U.S. doe to help Jim Crow grow. 61 years ago, these courageous marchers asked to ensure that no federal funds be used in a discriminatory manner. And this is really the premise of Title VI. To receive money or other assistance from the federal government, an entity has to agree not to discriminate on the basis of race, color, or national origin.
Sorry.
At the Federal Coordination and Compliance section of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, we're tasked with enforcing Title VI. We not only investigate Title VI cases, but we work with other federal agencies to ensure the consistent enforcement of Title VI across the federal government. This is under our authority under Executive Order 12250. This means that we ensure that no matter who funds an agency, whether that's the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security, the message remains the same. Individuals with limited English proficiency must be afforded meaningful access to federally funded programs. I also like to go over quickly the legal basis for language access requirements. Here, national origin and language are closely related. Under Title VI, failing to make certain programs and activities accessible to LEP people may amount to national origin discrimination. We look for the standard of meaningful access to such programs and activities. I wanted to start my presentation with an overview of Title VI because it's the foundation of the Department of Justice's Law Enforcement Language Access Initiative, or as we affectionately call it, LELI. The initiative, or LELI, builds on the department's longstanding work to ensure that law enforcement agencies are complying with their language access obligations in alignment with Title VI and the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968. Launched in December of 2022, LELI is a nationwide effort to provide law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to ensure that individuals with limited English proficiency have effective and meaningful language access to law enforcement agencies. This initiative is led by the Civil Rights Division's Federal Coordination and Compliance Section in partnership with U.S. Attorneys' offices. On your screen here are a few of the goals. At the end of the day, we know this is a tough climate for law enforcement agencies. There is attrition, budget concerns, morale concerns. So we propose a collaborative approach to addressing language barriers with various communities rather than an adversarial one. You see on the screen some of our goals, including developing technical assistance resources and tools, engaging law enforcement that already want to review, update, or strengthen their language access policies or procedures, collaborating with U.S. attorneys' offices to conduct language access trainings in communities across the country, and then finally strengthening the department's ties and engagement with LEP community stakeholders and other stakeholder populations. One example of the initiative's work is a virtual convening that we had with law enforcement stakeholders back in December. During this convening, we issued a letter to law enforcement agencies reiterating their federal civil rights obligations to provide language assistance services to individuals with limited English proficiency and to provide effective communication to deaf and hard of hearing individuals. There was a panel discussion of department officials and law enforcement leaders. And finally, during the convening, in partnership with the COPS Office and the National Center for Policing Innovation, we launched a free training portal for law enforcement agencies with resources that support efforts to overcome language barriers. And here I'm going to walk you quickly through the portal now. Just click that. So this is what the portal looks like. It is free, and all you need to do is sign in to gain portal access. And this is the specific e-learning resource and language access page. We'll also put the link in the chat. And this portal contains a virtual language access training video. And then more importantly, I think, which is of interest to a lot of law enforcement agencies, FBI Advice of Rights forms translated into over 40 languages. We also have a copy of the letter I mentioned and a joint DOJ-DHS resource guide for law enforcement. We also have links to settlement agreements, which we house on lep.gov. And if you haven't already gone to lep.gov, this is what it looks like. And this is maintained by our office, and we have a specific law enforcement page. Some of the important resources that we share include this document, which is issued by the National Institute of Justice. It's a Spanish glossary and training module for law enforcement agencies and has Spanish content related to various scenarios, including conducting interviews, crime scenes, incidents related to motor vehicles, and domestic violence. One of the features of our initiative are our language access training. It's our goal to teach and empower U.S. attorneys' offices so that they can train local law enforcement and help them improve their language access policies and procedures. What makes our trainings unique is that they're interactive and participatory. In the first picture, you'll see participants pairing off to learn about the difficulties of interpretation. We use dash cam clips, real-life transcription of translations, competitive games, and comedy clips to get our point across. The case that really kicked off the initiative was the Denver Police Department matter. Our working relationship with Denver showed us what was possible. And since you'll hear from Denver a little later on, I won't say too much, except that Denver PD was already known for their commitment to exploring alternative policing approaches. For example, where people were experiencing mental health distress and substance abuse disorders. DPD was willing and active partners in overcoming language barriers, and I look forward to hearing their remarks later on today. And then finally, I wanted to show you examples of recent settlement agreements that we've resolved as part of the initiative. One is with King County Sheriff's Office, and another, just actually earlier this month, we issued a memorandum of understanding with the Dane County, Wisconsin Sheriff's Office. We try to get the word across by attending national conferences, a policing conference, and related workshops. We recognize that for many law enforcement agencies, you're more likely to take advice from your peers rather than someone necessarily from the Civil Rights Division. We've been lucky enough to identify key language access validators, police chiefs and sheriffs who have been or subject to a Title VI language access investigation, who can attest to the importance of preparing in advance and drafting effective language access policies and procedures. For all our initiative trainings and workshops, we prioritize partnering with law enforcement agencies. And then I'm sure if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lorene. We are now going to turn the slides over to Natasha, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Leslie, and good morning, everyone. I am Officer Natasha Hansberger with the Portland Police Bureau, Oregon. I'm very excited and humbled to participate in this webinar and present the genesis of our language justice program that began in 2017. I hope that my Bureau's case study can serve as both a guide, but foremost evidence that police organizations lacking in resources, language access experience, and infrastructure can successfully and proactively build a foundation that would further lead to development and implementation of language access policies, procedures, and practices that are in alignment with constitutional policing. I have to make a note that I never held a position in the Bureau of Language Access Manager. However, working for about 4 years as a UN interpreter during my home country's armed conflict provided me with a unique field experience. It deepened my understanding of language justice, which I transferred to the context of the US constitutional policing framework. As a community engagement lead for my organization, I also work closely with culturally and linguistically diverse community-based organizations that provide direct services and advocacy to our LEP communities. It was a combination and fusion of these professional experiences and the fact that I was also a police interpreter that guided my approach to developing and overseeing our language justice program. So we have focused solely since 2017 solely on 2 areas of this program development: policy or our directive and training development and implementation, both online interactive learning and in-person and practical skills for our bilingual Bureau-approved interpreters. Building this program can be daunting and monumental, at times overwhelming. Since we were building the foundation from ground up, my first mission and objective was to identify my internal champions who possessed a unique skill set and passion for this cause. And I'm proud to state that identifying such member was not as hard as I initially thought. So our language team was initially built with participation of our policy director, who led the entire policy section writing and research, our talented divisionary crime data analysts who built internal Bureau tableau comprised of language line data usage to be used to inform proactive crime prevention strategies, working with our LEP communities. Our training video specialists who produced a series of innovative learning videos on language justice in policing, and foremost, our instructional training curriculum designer. Those members were part of our unique team. We work closely with our city attorney's office, providing case law analysis and research, guiding us to shift at that time our existing language access policy. So engaging internal members was as important to us for internal legitimacy and transparency as working with external LEP partners. We had many roundtable discussions with our internal members to solicit their input, share experiences on what worked well and what needed more improvement as we organizationally respond and serve, interact with our LEP community partners. Our Chief's Office has built a very robust advisory group infrastructure platform that we tapped into because a lot of our LEP immigrant and refugee community partners were in their home countries skilled and trained linguists and language experts. So it meant natural and organic to engage with them early in the process of shaping our internal policy and directive to inform not just our process, but to inform our policy development on the relevancy and build a policy that is culturally tailored to communities that we serve daily to really raise police legitimacy and accountability. And it was based on our harm reduction model and approach. In summary, this was our internal and external team of stakeholders and individuals who deeply believed and cared for procedural justice. In 2019, coincidentally, 2 years into our team building and research and internal mapping and landscape analysis, the City Auditor's Office published a report about PPP practices fulfilling our language access mandate and provided several recommendations to our executives to improve both policy and training. This document was vital because it was the first one on the city level to examine police culture surveys and identify gaps. And I'm proud to say that our team at this point also identified similar gaps and was already proactively working to mitigate further harm and further risks. Another aspect of this document in policing, such reports can often be viewed as a critical overview. We use this document, however, as a leverage, a positive one, to argue for more institutional commitment and justify the need for command buy-in because we already had a line 11 officer buy-in and community buy-in. The same year, in 2019 going 2020, we designed and distributed our very first internal language survey to gauge our in-house linguistic strength and demographic of all of our members. And if any of the participants on this webinar would like to get a copy of our survey questions and design, I'm more than happy to share after the webinar. This was our first step in creating a list of bilingual members and starting an internal conversation about the need for further training and testing of this police skill set. However, one of the survey's most significant unintended outcome was a unique data information and valuable data set that our police leadership and police executives needed to integrate linguistic and cultural strength and diversity into our hiring and recruitment strategy. And not to mention how it was important for our police managers interfacing diverse communities to say that we, as a police bureau, have about 10% of our overall staffing are members who are linguistically and culturally diverse, in some ways representing communities that we serve. That was really positively received by both our managers and, of course, our community as our primary customer. Trying to change my slide. Okay, so even when police agencies have limited financial resources, as we all do at this point, there's always a way, as we would say in our refugee world, to form well-needed language alliance. We partner up with a local university, Portland State, and its foreign language department. We offered internship opportunities to graduate level students of foreign language who then work closely with our community engagement officers and provided language interpretation and translation support as we interfaced in proactive crime prevention fashion with our LEP communities. We identified community-based organizations and subject matter experts who work directly with LEP clients to inform and guide our training development, in addition to our policy development and design. And those community partners share their stories, as I will show it here soon, about their experiences, not just interfacing police, but also being used by police in the capacity of both child and adult interpreter. And that police training was really well received by our police officer because we used this storytelling as an innovative instructional design to elevate adult learning. But this was only possible because of the support, buy-in, and engagement and shared responsibility of our LEP community members and experts. Pardon me, going too fast here. Our police bureau is very excited to be part of a much larger network of the city of Portland. We are working closely with our citywide language access manager, who convened a group to build standardized practices across the city and across our bureaus. Her guidance and vision is to bring all city bureaus to elevate the need and recognition for removing historical and structural barriers serving our LEP communities in the city of Portland. It is under her leadership and her team that the city enacted a language incentive pay resolution for all bilingual employees and provided a proficiency testing platform. Now, our police bureau has an active and growing list of bilingual members who participated in this testing process. We are, I believe, in a month delivering our first in-house training on legal interpreting in policing to all our bilingual members and building a detached team program. We are currently working with our language access manager and our 911 center to identify language vendors and contractors who are best suited for the nature of our service. This service requires timely access to accurate and proficient language services needed for LEP persons to navigate our justice system effectively and equitably, and to empower our officers to perform their investigations more effectively and proficiently. Now that we spent all these years since 2017 examining our organizational needs and landscape and capacity for most limitations, we believe that now we are competent, have a much informed understanding should we decide to apply for federal grant to further develop our foundational program into much more robust. So this was our genesis. We spent all this time researching and examining and learning about our own landscape so that we have more evidence and data-informed approach when applying for federal grants to further language justice for our organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Denver, try to get you to the right slides. Over to you. Hello? We're not hearing you. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, wherever you're at. First off, I just want to give a big thanks to NIWAP for hosting this along with the Department of Justice. And just thank you for everyone for spending a little bit of time just gaining some of this information from everybody. This has been great so far. My name is Stacey Shantz. I'm a sergeant with the Denver Police Department. I'm along here with my partner, Sergeant Emily Bastian. We are both aides to the chief's office here with the Denver Police Department, and we're both heads of our language access department with the department here. And we're also lucky enough to be joined by Hannah Sell, who is our department's grant management and analyst, who will be speaking here momentarily on behalf of some of our grant administration team. Now, we start with our beginning slide because, like with every good story, you have to start from the beginning. And as the language access coordinators, one of the most questions that we get all the time that are asked is, where did you even start or begin in this rebuilding process? So as it was previously discussed, the department underwent an MOU with the Department of Justice. And well, like most of us in law enforcement, as we promote and move around throughout the department, you start off first by learning what your new objectives are. So when it came up to the chief's office, going through these files, and I'm asking the person that I'm filling in their shoes, okay, well, what's this about? What's this about? Well, language access came up and this file came up, and I'm like, okay, well, what do we do for this? And he's like, so, oh, it's just a couple teams meetings, not a big deal. Well, had my first team meeting with the Department of Justice, and you can say, needless to say, that it didn't go as planned, and I was quickly turned on to what exactly that we had to do for this. So during this meeting, we all kind of learn about the term of MOU and what an MOU is. Well, MOU is where agencies enter into this memorandum of understanding to not only make necessary corrections, usually because of something that didn't go as planned or immediate corrections that need to be made, but to build stronger partnerships, not with your department, but also with your community as well on training, education, and outreach. Now, I know most of us in law enforcement love to be told that we need to change or that we failed to do something right. But after reading the MOU in its entirety, we quickly realized that we had to immediately address these problems, not only for our department, but to follow these guidelines of the MOU, and more so for our community members and to prove the overall community trust. We needed to build those bridges to bring these language barriers together. So to do this, we began by analyzing everything we had in place and that was designated for language access. All of our language access plans will not be the same. Each will have its own minimum threshold as you compare some larger multicultural cities such as New York compared to a smaller city with limited resources. The beginning can be a bit overwhelming to say the least, especially when you start crunching numbers. And I wish I had an easy solution for all of us, but it's just not out there. It takes time, takes dedication, and of course, some financial assistance. And this is where we begin looking outside of the box. And instead of doing more with less, we begin doing more with what we already have in place. I'll turn it over to my partner, Emily Bashan.
All right, so I do want to give my partner, Sergeant Shantz, a lot of the credit here. He began this before I was assigned here in the chief's office. But one of the things that he and his partner at the time looked at is what do we already have in place? As being part of this MOU, we have received requests from other departments that have been in this position, and the overreaching question, and I think sometimes the overreaching fear that we're getting is the cost of these resources and the changes that need to be made. So what they did was look within our department and look at our own policies and procedures and the resources that we already had. And they asked questions like, do we have resources for the officers when they contact an LEP individual? And what means do we have to communicate with an LEP individual effectively, efficiently, and equitably? Most of you, I assume, have some sort of language assistance that's already in place, and that's a good place to start. Whether or not you're reviewing your own policies and procedures ahead of time, or if it's something where you do become under an MOU with the Department of Justice. The other thing that I will say that's been very, very helpful is that we do have Sergeant Shantz and I are our language access coordinators here on the Denver Police Department. And we do outreach with each of our districts administrative lieutenants. And among those, we are able to get the feedback from the officers on the street to know what's working well and what things that we would potentially need to change, as well as having somebody who's specifically responsible for these things to ensure that they're actually occurring. Some of the language assistance services, some of the things that we did in the language assistance services we have are here on the slide. I do want to talk about and highlight our bilingual officer program. This is something that we already had in place prior to our communication with the Department of Justice, but it did need to be revamped. We do still offer incentives for our bilingual officers, and we've been able for, I'd say probably about half of our languages, we've been able to partner with Metro State University. It's a college just down the street here from our headquarters, and they've been able to offer testing through their language program based on the stories that we've heard from other departments, a pretty significant price decrease from what other agencies are receiving. So the suggestion that I would have there is reach out to all the colleges and universities in your area and find out what services they offer and how much that would cost. And now I'm going to turn it over to Hannah, who is our grant coordinator, and she's going to discuss some things.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak to you all. So just from my perspective, in addition to calls of service, DPD utilizes our language access program for grant projects. This year,
Keep going.
Yeah. Go back, sorry. So this year alone, DPD has had 34 active grants. 25 of those are community focused. The projects include youth interventions, support for mental health, for persons experiencing mental health crisis, crime interventions such as auto theft and fentanyl investigations, traffic interventions, community engagement, and victim services. Since close to 74% of our grant projects involve the public, language access is essential to providing equitable services. This year, this year, DPD applied for a COPS Community Policing Development Grant, the Law Enforcement Products and Resources Grant, in hopes to utilize AI video technology to enhance training curriculum for our officers, as well as provide informational videos for the public. These AI videos will provide department-approved content in various languages to cater to the diverse and multilingual community throughout Denver. Approval for this project is still pending with the COPS department, but that's something that we're really hopeful that we will be able to be approved for. And then in 2025, DPD plans to expand upon our current language access program to better serve our community through grant funding with these different types of projects. So not just focusing on the projects and those activities, but how we can integrate further language access within those programs. So thank you.
And then just to kind of wrap up our portion, like I said, we're continually adapting and looking for other means and kind of reevaluating everything that we're doing and utilizing all these different resources to do that. And I suggest that the departments do this as well. The departments looking into this do this as well. But we're always looking for feedback. If you see something that we have done or that you like, please share that with us. Or if you have suggestions for us, we're definitely open to it. We're going to drop in our DPD Language Services email account on here into the comments feed, along with our DPD Language Assistance website that we'd like everybody to take a look at. Please feel free to reach out with any information if you have any questions. I know we just kind of touched on the beginning of this, as there's just a lot of pieces that go into this that I would love to just spend a lot more time talking to people individually. If there's a lot more questions, or if there's questions that we can answer towards the end of this, we'd be happy to do so. And actually, we as a team built out a toolbox for other departments and are utilizing it right now that we hand out to other people as well, just to kind of help get them started with some resources. And if that's something you're interested, please reach out, let us know, and I'd love to share it with you guys. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay. So we're going to go back to Hildy so the next section, we're going to talk to two agencies that have done funding at the state level. And we're going to start with Mary Ellen, I believe. So these are both the next two agencies presenting have been involved as state STOP or VOCA administrators, and going to be talking about the role that the state can play in funding language access. Mary Ellen?
All right. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Can somebody? I can't.
Yes.
I've got the slides.
There we go. Hello, everybody. Oh, I'm super excited. And I echo what Natasha was saying as well. Honored to be here. My name is Mary Ellen Garcia. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And you're wondering, why is a coalition director here talking about being a funder? Prior to me taking on this role just a few months ago in the coalition, I was the state funder for the state of New Mexico for over 15 years. I administered, I was our grants bureau chief administering the state's Victims of Crime Act, VOCA victim assistance funding, as well as our state STOP, VAWA funding, discretionary funds, and other state funds. And I have been working with Leslie and her team and Hildy and API and the Vera Institute for probably most of that time around language access and language accessibility. And here in the state of New Mexico, when the executive order was first issued in the early 2000s, we were one of the very first states that required language access plans of any program or project that received state or federal funds, regardless of whether you were a nonprofit or a law enforcement agency, and began what we'd like to believe is a robust language access program in the state of New Mexico. And really, we have taken in the state, particularly with our nonprofits and our survivor services, the lens of language access equals access to justice and access to our systems. And I think it was, the Denver Police Department who was just talking about, tools and resources and folks having concerns about how do we fund this, right? How do we ensure that we have the resources necessary to be able to provide this? And one of the tools that we have done in our state has taken the perspective of really kind of breaking it down to you cannot operate services without the lights on. You cannot operate services without the gas bill being paid and the water bill being paid. And we actually require of all of our funded programs that you have a line item for accessibility in your budget in order to receive funding in the state of New Mexico. And this includes our law enforcement agencies who receive funding. They have to have an accessibility line item in their budget, because we have taken the stance that to not have accessibility built within your budget, you compromise survivor safety. It's as simple as that for us. And as simple as that statement is, we understand how incredibly difficult it is. And when we're talking about having the resources necessary, one of the things that I like to talk about is what, as law enforcement agencies who are coming to this webinar, what role do you play within your organization and what power do you hold? Because there can be forced compliance. There can be compliance related to, we understand that this is the ethical thing to do. And you can be in a position where you want to ensure that you have accessibility and that you do this well, but you're not in a position of power. And so you may have to utilize the laws that were outlined to say, we have to do this and create a forced compliance with your desire to do this ethically. And so I think coming from the perspective and wanting to really share, and I've been reading the chats, how do we do this? How do we find the funding to do this? How do we apply for these grants to get this money? How do we access the VOCA funding? How do we access the STOP funding? How do we access your providers, within community to understand? And my recommendations would be this: develop relationships with your state coalitions and with your state funders, and build those memorandums of understanding. And sometimes those start off as handshake agreements on, we are going to get there, but we're not there yet. And build relationships with your state funders. And some of the things that we have funded, particularly with our law enforcement agencies, are supporting a task force, right? Being able to bring folks in and sit around the table in small frontier rural communities to talk about how do we access interpreters in a community or translations of documents in a community when we only have 2 interpreters of the same language, and they can't be interpreting for the law enforcement agency and the victim service agency at the same time and not have a conflict of interest. And so how do we do that? And how do we establish policies and procedures to do that? And that's been one of the things that we have funded in the state is law enforcement agency takes the initiative, or if they don't have the capacity, the local nonprofit takes the initiative to apply for that funding to put a task force together. Some of the other things that we have funded with law enforcement are task forces to rewrite language access plans at a statewide level, bringing in national experts to sit and sometimes have the human capital to do that. And so I think, in the time that I'm kind of given here today to talk about accessing funding, the first thing I would say is recognize your power in what you are doing within your law enforcement agency. Build a relationship with your statewide funder and your statewide coalitions, and reach out to states such as myself and other states so that we can talk about ways in which those funds can be utilized to help build and increase accessibility, because we all know that you all as law enforcement agents and 911, you're the first call that many of our survivors reach out to. And it's a frightening time. And when you make that call and the person on the other end or the person you're standing in front of doesn't understand you, it just amplifies that fear and increases and decreases the survivor safety. And so I want to be able here to support anybody in any way possible to create accessible programming and funding within within your states to really push this forward, so that it's built within the budget. It's already something that you just do automatically, as opposed to something you think you have to do. And I will turn it over. Sorry, I took more than my 5 minutes. I took 6 minutes and 42 seconds. I apologize.
No worries, Mary Ellen. I appreciate you so very much. As I stated previously, I work with the API GVV, but prior to that, I worked for 8 years with the Utah Office of Victims of Crime. And I was working with doing outreach in Boca. At the administration part, like the Boca grants part. And one of the things we saw when we were reviewing grants was, a lot of times there was like red flags if individuals stated that they were working with underserved community with the LEP survivors, but they did not have any budget or plans to do that. And so we will work with them in regards to like, what, do you have a bilingual staff? Is that who your plan is, right? Looking at what their language access plans was. And that was one of parts of my job, was to review the language access plans. A lot of them, they were either copy the Lexipol, which I do not recommend, and I'll kind of put in there. The API GVV, we do have a template, and we're happy to work with creating, help you with the policy and looking at that and reviewing it. But so when I work with the Utah Office of Victims of Crime, we will have them, as Mary Ellen stated, like task force. A lot of the rural areas, they will have like a task force, but also they will work with cultural competence services and create MOUs and work together on how to serve the community, because a lot of times it is a close-knit community. If there is someone that speaks the language, spoken language, it may be someone that they know the individual, or maybe their Spanish does not have some of the legal terminology or some of the terminology that can affect the safety of the individual. So one of the things that we will help, it was translation, interpretation, ensuring that they had that in their budget, and one of the things too is creating brochures, flyers, information that had the information for the individual, those individuals that were coming in and working with safety plans, also creating on that. But one of the things too is updating those, because a lot of times we may update the English, but we will not update the other languages. So looking at your demographics, that was a very important part for us too, to look at your demographics as who you're serving, who's the individuals, and just having those languages translated. Also doing community outreach and knowing those community, what their needs are. It was something too that we were looking into in regards to the grants and looking at that part to be able to do that. But being able to truly get to know those individuals, but also have them in the table and see what's the best, how they can be better served, trauma informed, right, on that part. So just being able to do those things, that's one of the, as I left the Utah Office of Victim of Crime, at this point, there's a local organization that is collaborating with law enforcement and creating videos for ESL community to be able to provide resources and to be able to give those best practices in regards to working with law enforcement. And it is very powerful to that collaboration and that working together. Also, in my next slide, there it is information on resources that from API GVV, and I apologize, it was it should have been in the other slides when I was speaking about API GVV. That's okay, Leslie. There's so many slides, so no worries. But so we have in there the resource library, which has information. We have a language access hub too, that it had, like I stated earlier in my previous when I was speaking earlier. It has in regards to tip sheets, but also it has templates when it comes to language access policies. And please know that myself and our team, the ITARC team and API GV, we're happy to always look at those policies and give you feedback and work with you all because it is important to, language access is safety for victims, in your communities, and it can change someone's life. And we're all here because we want to make a difference in someone's life. So there are directory and we have information in regards to also interpretations. If there is a lesser fusion language too, please, we can provide information on that. So, but thank you so much. Maybe I took a little bit less for Mariela. And here's my contact information. My door is virtually, I'm in Rochester, New York right now, working with victim service community. So I'm happy to support in any way we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So, and let me just say both NIWAP and API GBV are OVW funded TA providers, and we're here. You can ask us questions and we can help steer you to law enforcement and prosecutors if you want to talk to another law enforcement prosecutor agency like that are doing this, like Denver and Portland. We'll be happy to do that. So now we're going to turn to a panel of federal funders who are going to talk about, from the federal government perspective, some of the resources that are available to support language access. And for all our presenters, I want to let you know we're all right on time, so we're good.
Thank you, Leslie. Can folks hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Let me just say, Mary Ellen, you were excellent in self-timekeeping. I'm going to try to stick to your precision as well. But thank you, Leslie, and our other colleagues for the opportunity to participate in today's important discussion. We're also very excited to be here today. And most importantly, thank you to everyone who's joined. My name is Rob Chapman. I'm a Deputy Director with the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or many folks know us as the COPS Office. And let's see if I can, sorry. So many folks know about the COPS Office, but for those who don't, we just celebrated our 30-year anniversary, having been established with passage of the 1994 Crime Act, which many folks are familiar with. We have a singular mission of advancing community policing. We do this through our grants and resources, which I'll touch on shortly. But we've distributed over $20 billion over the course of our history. Many folks know us through our flagship program of hiring police officers, deputies, and troopers. But we do many other things, which again, I'll be briefly introducing. Let me just say that by virtue of your participation today, that we know that those on this webinar are keenly aware, as much as anyone, that community policing is really just good policing. It stresses partnership and collaboration, problem solving, organizational changes to address crime and public safety challenges, and it relies on a much wider range of tools beyond important enforcement related tools. So that's what the COPS Office is about. Of course, we also know that the community and police need to be co-producers of public safety. And that community means all segments, which is again why today's discussion is so important. So that's what language access initiatives are meant to support, and that's why it's important to us. So I mentioned our resources. We are, of course, a grant-making agency. And I'll talk specifically about some of the grant resources that are available to law enforcement agencies to support language access initiatives in just a moment. But Maureen mentioned our free language access training that's available through our portal. You can just Google COPS Office training portal, and that'll take you right there. We encourage everyone to access that. Creating an account, as Lauren mentioned, is really easy, and accessing the training is very easy. So this is really meant to be practical, high quality training intended for law enforcement officers, but also the community as well. At COPS, we have dozens of other in-person and virtual training programs available, all free of charge. Much of it is post-certified, depending on the state. We also work very closely with IABLIS, which is the National Association of the Standards and Training Managers and Leaders. So we have close relationships with those folks as well. But beyond grants and training, we also provide free, tailored, for the field, by the field, technical assistance on virtually any topic or issue, including establishing or expanding language access initiatives. We do this through what we call our Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, or CRITAC. That's CRITAC is overseen by, and those services are provided by a historic coalition that's headlined by the International Association of Chiefs of Police, working closely with 8 other national law enforcement stakeholder organizations. To date, we've provided tailored technical assistance and training to over 1,400 agencies, so it's extremely popular. If you want assistance to implement a language access program in your agency, we can do peer exchanges. We can connect you with others that have been successful in developing or expanding their initiatives, provide you access to subject matter experts. Virtually anything that you're interested in is completely tailored to your request. So if you want that assistance in implementing a language access program in your agency, please visit our website and make a request through CRITAC, and we'll be right back in touch to schedule some time to talk about the options for you. And then finally, another sort of set of our resources. We have one of the largest libraries of publications and guides for law enforcement and the communities that they serve. We have these on virtually any topic, including language access best practices. So, talking about publications, and this is just a few related guides that I just wanted to quickly highlight, several of which we partnered with the Vera Institute to produce on language access. But again, we're working to provide a variety of resources that provide information and support to law enforcement agencies. We do this training, technical assistance, and publications that I spoke about. We know that establishing relationships with and providing services to all segments of the community helps to garner trust and improves crime prevention goals. It assists in calls for service responses and investigations. It's important. So we know that strategies to address language access barriers are going to help to improve interactions. It's going to lead to better crime reduction outcomes, improve public safety, and of course, increase trust and legitimacy outcomes as well. But most importantly, I know folks are really interested in grant funding. So I'll quickly turn to our grant resources. And really what I want to focus on is our COPS Office microgrant program. This slide contains a lot of information, but I know folks are going to have access to the slides. But I just want to summarize what this funding is about, because it has a ton of flexibility around it, including to help stand up or expand language access initiatives. Again, it's called our microgrants program. There is more information on the grant program on our website. But through this program, we fund a lot of different projects that help support things like community engagement and crime prevention initiatives. There are a few specific topic areas where programs like language access can be funded through. And the specific topics that we ask for that I think most relate would be providing resources to underserved populations, as well as building trust and legitimacy. And then finally, we also have an open topics. So we have multiple ways that you can apply for funding through microgrants. Again, there's a lot of flexibility for you to pitch innovative ideas. The award amounts vary. The cap is $175,000. We have lots of requests from agencies that request smaller amounts, really to just give them seed funding to help stand up innovative programs. So really encourage you to take a look at that. We have concluded sort of this year's solicitation application collection process. So that program's on hold, but we are expecting to release a new solicitation early next fiscal year for us sometime in the spring. So you can find out more information about the micro grant program on our website, and I'd encourage you to look at that as a funding source for next fiscal year. And just want to feature sort of one specific micro grant that was really incredible. A program that we, of course, we've funded hundreds of micro grants over the years, but in this slide, we highlight a specific COPS funded initiative that the Harwood Heights, Illinois Police Department implemented. HHPD received funding to address a rash of crimes targeting the elderly, and in particular, a close-knit Polish-speaking population in their community through hosting and tailoring and targeting a series of crime prevention seminars. So this was an initiative that benefited from some seed funding, fairly straightforward, but the seed funding was really important. And so with the funding, they were able to stand it up, and it made a big impact in the community. I'll just quickly circle back to our publications. Again, we have hundreds and hundreds of publications, virtually any community policing topic. I do want to note that a handful of those are translated into other languages, including Spanish, Hmong, Vietnamese, and Cantonese. If you see any of our English language publications that you think would be valuable to be translated, please reach out and let us know. We have a fantastic office in the Department of Justice, access to justice. And we're always looking for ways to partner with them to develop resources like crime prevention publications and make those available in other languages to meet the needs of communities and law enforcement agencies across the country. So if you have a need for a specific English language publication that you see on the COPS office website or within our library, and you'd like to see that translated into another language, just please let us know. And so I just want to conclude by saying that the COPS office is really proud to partner with our federal colleagues in supporting state and local language access initiatives. We view language access to be central to achieving fundamental community policing goals and to help develop meaningful, impactful relationships with all parts of the community. Language access services are essential to building trust. We know that the challenges are not insignificant. These oftentimes are a little challenging to implement, but if the COPS office can help through our grant funding, through any of our technical assistance resources that I touched upon, any other resources, we would love to continue to serve in that role. Literally is why the COPS office exists as an agency within DOJ. So looking forward to working with folks into the future. With that, I think I'll conclude. Just thanks to NIWAP and Leslie for hosting the event. Thanks to our colleagues throughout the DOJ and especially OBW for sponsoring this event. And again, most importantly, thank you to all for taking the time to participate. And with that, I'll happily yield to my colleague, Vince Davenport at BJ, who I know has some equally incredible resources as well to share. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rob. And so I always like, whenever I'm on a webinar or a convening or conference where there's law enforcement in the room, I can't help myself but put out a shameless plug for street cred with all of you. And so I currently serve as the Associate Deputy Director in the office in the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I oversee the Law Enforcement Operations Division. Prior to that, I served 26 years on the job in Kansas City, Kansas. So let me just start by saying just how much we appreciate what you're doing in 2024 in a post-George Floyd world that we all live in, where policing has changed and it needed to change. But the fact that you're out there doing what you're doing, whether you're a frontline officer, whether you're an interpreter, a victim advocate, dispatcher, whatever your role is, just know that it's never been more important. And the Bureau of Justice Assistance, this is what we're here for. We're here to support you. Every year, Congress gives us billions of dollars with one specific objective: to make sure that this money gets out to the people that need it across the criminal justice continuum. And a big chunk of that, about $1 billion, is for law enforcement. And so, and actually, before I just tell you about the programs, I'm just throwing one more little plug. Pure coincidence, when I was asked to join this webinar, I was really excited. As it happens, I am a certified court interpreter in Laotian. I've done a lot of interpreting in my career for the FBI, federal courts, state courts, a lot of simultaneous interpreting in the courtroom. So language access, that's obviously something that's really close to my heart. That's the first language in our home. with all of our kids. And so, all right, that's the end of my plug. So now I'll get into where BJA stands with regard to language access funding. So I told you that we have about $1 billion for law enforcement programs. But here's the thing: of all that money that Congress gives us, none of it is actually directed to language access services. And that's fine, because we have a really important kind of a workaround that I really want to spend the bulk of my time talking about today. And when I'm talking about grants, we give out two major categories of grants. We have discretionary grants and formula grants. Everything I'm going to talk about today, these are discretionary, which means they're competitive, which means everybody on this call, if you're in law enforcement or law enforcement adjacent discipline, chances are you qualify for everything I'm going to talk about today. And here's how I'm going to weave in the language access piece. So we have hundreds of millions of dollars available to law enforcement and other law enforcement adjacent kind of disciplines to support behavioral health programs. And so there's no community that's not struggling with behavioral health issues, whether it's substance use disorder, people that have mental health issues, people who are in crisis. All of these issues, they just eat up resources in ways that I don't think that most people really fully understand. And so you can apply for funding, and I'm going to give you some examples of different programs under these programs for millions of dollars, so long as you tell us what's the issue you're trying to address in your community, how will this money help you to execute your plan to improve the problem that you're talking about, whether it's substance use, whether it's people that are having mental health crisis or whatever. And here's the key language access takeaway. Whatever funding you apply for, you can build into your budget specific funding for language access services. So if you've got if you're asking for $3 million for a program that's really specifically targeted to kind of a particular community where English is limited, then it would make perfect sense for you to build in whatever you feel is needed for language services to go along with that program. And so if you were dealing with a community that spoke Spanish, you could certainly build in whatever, whether it's you want to hire interpreters, whether you want to incorporate translation services into your service delivery, whatever language access assistance you need. Really, there are very few limitations on how you can frame that, so long as it makes sense. And what we're looking for when we evaluate these applications is, we're not looking for a bunch of filler. We're looking for you stating what the problem is, how the funding will help, and how language access and why language access is an important piece there. So just know that that's the formula. And I'm just going to hit a few programs here for the next couple minutes. We have a Stop School Violence program. We make funding available to support efforts within schools to prevent violence, promoting a healthy, positive community climate. And in a lot of schools, there are a lot of languages spoken, and language access services could be built into any application that you build in under the Stop School Violence program. Our Smaller Rural Violent Crime Initiative, you can address whatever problem you want to address. As long as you're a smaller rural violent or smaller rural law enforcement agency, tell us what you need the money for. And if it involves language access services, build that into your budget, and that's an allowable expense. Community-based violence intervention, we deal with a lot of CVI entities across the country. And I know this isn't law enforcement specific, but it's law enforcement adjacent. So if you have CVI partners in your community that could use language access services, they could apply under our CVI program, incorporate language access services into a crime reduction program or project, and that would be an allowable expense. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to have to skip some of these. A lot of different forensics programs. A lot of people are victims of sexual assault and sexually motivated crimes. This is an area where you could build in robust language access services. And I know I'm already at 6 minutes, so I'm just going to stop here, and I'm just going to have to hit one more plug for, in addition to language access services, just know that we've got really robust training resources around officer safety and wellness that really we know matters today. And just know that if there's a program that supports law enforcement, in addition to the COPS office, BJA probably has it, and it's probably eligible for language access to be built into whatever budget you want to submit. And with that, I'm going to have to stop because I'm at almost 7 minutes. You'll get copies of these slides, and we hope to hear from some of you if you've got ideas for programs that you'd like to receive funding for that require language access services to be built in. Contact us. We'll help you build that out. Thank you.
And we'll give you what's going to happen next is after everybody's done presenting, we are going to take questions. So you may have a few more minutes to weigh in as well. So, and please share any resources with us and we'll put them on the webpage. So next we are turning over to Aisha at OVW.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Good afternoon. My name is Aisha Battle, and I am an Associate Director at the Office on Violence Against Women and work predominantly on our criminal justice portfolio, which provides funding for law enforcement, salaries, equipment, language access work, and training and technical assistance. A quick overview of the Office on Violence Against Women, also known as the OVW. OVW was created after the passage of the Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA, in 1995, originally comprised of only about a handful of grant programs. Now in 2024, and largely thanks to the Violence Against Women Act of 2022, OVW has over 26 grant programs. And this year we anticipate making about $690 million worth of awards. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary 2 weeks ago, and you can certainly turn to the OVW website to see recordings from some of the presentations that were done at the Department of Justice in honor of the Violence Against Women Act, as well as see the Attorney General Garland speak about VAWA. As stated on the previous slide, OVW supports about 26 grant programs, and we also have formula and discretionary programs. OVW formula programs consist of our sexual assault services program, as well as our services training officers and prosecutors Violence Against Women formula grant program. So those are our SASP and our STOP program. And their funding is given directly to states, the District of Columbia, and the territories to release their own solicitations, now known as NOFOs, Notice of Funding Opportunities. The STOP program is our largest grant program in the office and provides funding to each state, territory, and the District of Columbia based on population to release their own solicitations. And that funding can go towards law enforcement. And if you are not familiar with your state STOP administrator or administrating office, we encourage you to get to know them and learn more about the application process. Our SASP program, which is the sexual assault version of our STOP program, works very similarly. And we have a formula program that funds state domestic violence and sexual assault coalitions. The bulk of our funding is awarded through the discretionary grant programs, which each release a NOFO each fiscal year for competitive funding. There are specific grant programs for advocacy, culturally specific and underserved programs, tribal specific programs and initiatives, legal services and courts, and law enforcement. And we encourage you to go to the OVW website for more information about those different grant programs. And for note, all of our grant programs require that you designate those proposed grant dollars, that you designate some of them for both language access as well as accessibility. So I'm going to spend the bulk of my time on our programs that fund law enforcement. So starting with our Improving Criminal Justice Responses program, it encourages states, local and tribal governments, as well as state, local, and tribal courts to treat our 4 crimes, which are domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, as serious violations of criminal law and coordinate the involvement of the entire criminal justice system. And that money can go towards funding law enforcement, salaries, equipment, training. And the program has about a $60 million appropriation. And for FY 2024, we are making 33 awards. It also has additional set-asides under there that allow you to address domestic violence homicide, as well as firearms relinquishment. The next program, our Enhancing Investigation and Prosecution Initiative, which is new to us through VAWA 2022, is a program that honestly cuts down a lot of the requirements that some of our programs have with signing certifications and different things, and puts money directly in the hands of law enforcement and prosecutors. They are both direct eligible entities under the program, and those dollars are to help fund investigation. And you can, of course, pay for salaries, equipment, training under that project. And this year, which is the first year, we have made grant awards under that program. We have made about $16 million in grants and are funding 32 awards. Our Abby Homo program, which is also new for VAWA 2022, is a demonstration initiative specifically for law enforcement. Under that program, through End Violence Against Women International, one of our law enforcement trainers, they have developed a curriculum addressing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, in which they will train the funded grantees in that curriculum. They will assist them in norming the curriculum to their communities so that it is not just a national curriculum, but it is something that is tailored to their community, as well as assist with evaluating how that curriculum and training is being deployed in communities. And for that program, there's funding that was available this year for $7 million, and we are making 6 awards from that in the first year of that program. We have our Tribal Governments program, which is built around enhancing the ability of tribes to respond to violent crimes against Indian women, enhance victim safety, and develop education and prevention strategies. And we anticipate making 60 awards this year for that money for $60 million. Next up, we have our rural program, where it's focused on enhancing the safety of rural victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. They also can do human trafficking along with our Tribal Governments program. And those projects very much uplift sexual assault is one of the priorities of that program, as well as uplift rural communities and rural designated states, which you can find more information about on our website. And that program anticipates making about $36.5 million in awards this year and 55 awards with that funding. And then we have our campus program, which trains campus law enforcement, though I do want to emphasize that under our other programs, campus law enforcement are eligible, that the campus program very much targets institutions of higher education to help address our 4 crimes on college campuses, and collaborating between campus with both campus law enforcement and local law enforcement, as well as local victim service agencies. And there are about 31 awards that we anticipate making under that program for $12.4 million this year. And there are 2 programs that are not on this slide I want to emphasize, and that is our Abuse in Later Life program, which is a training intensive program in which you can pay for officer overtime in training of on elder abuse. And for that, it comes with a training curriculum, and it is a train the trainer focused program. In addition, we have a new program from VAWA 2022 that funds law enforcement, and that is our cyber crimes program that is very much around training law enforcement in the investigation of cyber crimes. And so you can find out more information about all of that on our website. Next up, I wanted to uplift one of our training resources. I know you have heard or already hear from NIWAP and API, who are technical training and technical assistance providers for us. We wanted to share an additional resource, and that is our Law Enforcement Training and Technical Assistance Consortium. I am quite proud that I have the pleasure of leading our Law Enforcement Training and Technical Assistance Consortium, which we affectionately call LETAC, and they provide training and technical assistance free of charge for law enforcement as well as ancillary professions, such as our 911 call takers and EMTs. I have the great pleasure of also getting to work on that project with Leslie and Natasha, who both serve as subject matter experts on LETAC, as well as LETAC is not just to provide training and technical assistance, but also the mission is to develop the next generation of law enforcement trainers. So we are always looking for people interested in becoming national trainers and working with them to hone them in their goals. Next up, I just want to highlight our TA to TA website, where you can go look at the other TA that we have available, such as TA that is on the next slide, our SPARK, our Stalking Prevention Awareness Resource Center that also does law enforcement training. And so please visit ta2ta.org to find out more about our training. And here's some information for potential applicants to find. You can go on the OVW website and find this information. We typically start releasing grant solicitations in November, so that is just around the corner. And so please continue to check back on our website. And lastly, here is our contact information. I'll also put my personal contact information in the chat, but if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And I lead the ICJR unit. So if you have any questions about the funding opportunities that were uplifted today, you can go to ovw.icjr@usdoj.gov and send us an email.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to go, there's a few, so first, Stacy and Emily, do you want to weigh in on any of, in response to any of the funders before I turn to the questions? We have about 4 minutes to go. Okay, I'm going to assume that's a no. Okay.
I'm sorry, just not weighing in, but just great information and definitely taking a lot of notes here as well. So I appreciate all the speakers.
Wonderful. So one of the things I wanted to say is I want to check in with just, and this is kind of a yes or no question, but for BJA, COPS, OVW, and the 2 state funders, we got a question about whether university police departments can apply. It's my understanding that that's yes. Am I wrong? Anybody? Am I correct?
That is correct. We have, in New Mexico, we actually funded for many years the largest university in the state.
Okay. So, Mary Ellen, there's a question for you. How do you think about whether a line item on accessibility when you're reviewing grants is sufficient?
Well, for us, it's not just the line item. That shows that they have the fiscal capital, but they also have to have an accessibility plan. And our proposal review teams review that accessibility plan. And if it doesn't meet the standards that we have as a state have established as priorities, and the LEP.gov, which is a great website, those standards, then part of the special conditions can be working with the state coalition, whether it be domestic or sexual violence, or our Indigenous coalition, working with our Children's Alliance, just depending upon whom, to help them revise, rewrite, what are the procedures to do that. So it's not just the line item, but it moved from just having a plan in place, also being able to fiscally support it.
Wonderful. One of the other questions that came in, and this is for any of the speakers, how do you measure the effectiveness of LEP services? And I guess what funding might there be to support that? Anybody want to try that one? Marie?
Sure. Yes. So in terms of evaluating the effectiveness of LEP services, that's why it's so important to have relationships with community-based organizations. Often, it's not unusual for recipients of federal funds to have those relationships and have those community groups assess whether or not the webpage is accessible, whether or not the brochures that they are distributing are at the right reading level and are translated correctly. I don't think there is necessarily a budget need for this. I hope one of the takeaways that you've received from this particular training is if you look at Portland Police Bureau or the Denver Police Department, they've done a ton without much money, in part because they have leaned in on their community contacts and they've leaned in on their current infrastructure to support a little more language access. But we're also happy to answer any questions about evaluation or monitoring language access plans if you just email us, and I'll drop my email address in the chat.
What's really important about that, Lorraine, is that that is consistent with what we're seeing in the field. Some of the social science research about this is where police departments have good relationships with programs serving immigrant and LEP victims. Those departments tend to be doing better jobs at language access generally because of those collaborations. Hildy, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I was just going to share in regards to, they're also seeing the numbers. I always speak about telling the story on your numbers of the individuals that you're reaching out. So if you see an increase of population from that community, it means that you're doing, that's how we see that you're doing that work, you're doing the outreach. But one of the things too is ensuring involving, those either community leaders and just asking them questions, have them review the paperwork, because even if you have, for example, something in Spanish, is that someone, was that translating to Spanish that individuals from Mexico or Puerto Rico will understand, or Venezuela? So making sure individuals that are in your community, is making sure that their voice is included, but also be involved and builds those trust with the immigrant and refugee population. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And we definitely saw that with both Denver and the Portland Police Bureaus. So I want to thank all of our speakers. I want to thank the interpreters and the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges for hosting us. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. I think this has been a very productive webinar, and we at NIWAP will make sure to put all of the resources that people shared on our webpage with the recording of this. Please take the time to fill out the survey evaluation to let us know how we did. And I want to thank everyone on this webinar, all the faculty, for the time and attention they spent developing this for you. And I hope that this helps enhance everybody's tools to provide more language access and assistance to immigrant and LEP populations. So thank you very, very much for joining us, and we will end here.